Robin. I have the honor of standing in for our minister, Vicki Elder, and our co-minister, Michelle Lynch, who is being ordained, I think probably as we speak. So please hold her in your thoughts and in your prayers. She will, of course, do an absolutely magnificent job of being ordained. She aces everything, that included. So I thought, being Father's Day, we would have our talk this morning be about fathers, fatherhood, and how we may be informed and also misinformed by our cultural stereotypes of father, and even what we have read in Holy Scriptures of various kinds. And hold all of that perhaps in the light of New Thought, which is Unity's tradition, and see what that has to tell us. Now, I don't know about you, but I have noticed there is a big difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Recognize this quote? Socrates, Plato, knowing the path and following the path? Well, no, actually it's from that great philosopher Morpheus in the movie The Matrix. I don't know about you, but I take my philosophical truths wherever I can find them. This could be considered part 3 of our Diving Deep into God series, which Vicki has been sharing with us. And in this one, we're looking at our current understanding of God, or truth, if you want to replace the word God with truth, that works for Unity, and how it affects various aspects of our living, including our parenting styles and choices. First, let me acknowledge that parenting is hard. When my oldest daughter was 7, I sent her to parochial school. Not because we were Catholic, but because as a single parent in Silicon Valley, even with a good job, I couldn't afford to live in a good school district. This act had unintended consequences. She came home one day and told me she'd gotten in trouble in school. But it was okay because God had told her to do it. So I said, well, exactly what did God tell you to do? She said, he told me to take a cookie from another child. So it took about a year of heavy applications of Unity theology before she became convinced that everything she did or didn't do, should do or shouldn't do, was actually being instructed by God. It took a while for her to get the idea that she was responsible. Interestingly, I know some adults who have yet to make this transition. Wanting to have a God who intervenes on our behalf is a natural extension for many of us, from needing and wanting parents who can intervene on our behalf. Something we want until we reach teenage. Then it's more like, yes, intervene and buy the car. No, don't intervene and tell me what time to be home. I don't know about you, but I can still get stuck in that place. Yes, God intervened and turned the coworker who was mean to me into a toad. And no, don't intervene because I've decided to blow my budget on shoes. I can handle that one just fine myself. No matter what kind of father we actually had, the stereotypes that are part of every culture, including our culture, about fathers, inform how we think about it and perhaps how we react when we're in the fathering role. And of course, that's a role that all of us play from time to time, not just men. Our culture's stereotype of fathers is that they're strong, they're decisive, they're protective, they're directive, and they might be strict, and they could even be punishing. But wait, that sounds a lot like the God of the Old Testament, doesn't it? Yep, that God, the one with the smiting and the smoting, that bad Yahweh dude who was replaced by the nice Jesus guy, who was loving and patient and kind, but somehow didn't make it into the culture as the cultural stereotype for fatherhood? What happened? Did God change between the Old Testament and the New Testament? And to make things even more confusing, our Unity teachings tell us that God never changes. The Bible says that God doesn't change. Hebrews tells us that Christ is the same today, yesterday, and forever. Well, if God doesn't change, then who's doing the changing? Let's see now. There's God and there's the people. There's the people and there's God, and God doesn't change. It's us. We're doing the changing. We move back and forth from believing in and wanting an intervening God and believing and wanting a God who doesn't intervene, because God lives inside us. Therefore, it's all about our responsibility. uncomfortable thought for me. I don't know how you feel about this, but it's uncomfortable for me. Well, some people might flop back and forth. Surely I don't. Surely I will be moved between wanting an intervening God and one that doesn't intervene. Right? Not me. I'm way too sophisticated, much too smart for that. But I'll tell you, the rest of you need some help. Here's some conversations I've overheard recently as I was trying to prepare for this talk. I was more aware than I normally am. One was a father to a young daughter who had thrown herself onto the grocery store floor and was kicking and holding her breath and having a full-on tantrum. He said, you know, God is always watching you, and he told me he doesn't like this. And then there was the lady that I overheard saying to her girlfriend, and so I prayed, and God still wouldn't give it to me, so I finally just went out and bought one. And my very favorite, no, I'm not worried about climate change. God is in charge, and he's a loving God. That's the ultimate belief in an intervening God. One who's so nice and caring that nothing bad can ever happen. So what do our Judeo-Christian traditions tell us about who's responsible for making changes, for fixing things? Take the story of Joseph. When Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, they did so with very wicked motives, right? Yet later in his life, he told his brothers, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. He meant it so that many people could live as they are. This one event of Joseph's imprisonment and enslavement had two different parties with completely different, conflicting motivations. God and Joseph's brothers. God meant it for good, and Joseph's brothers meant it for evil. Joseph does not excuse his brother's evil just because God ordained them for good. Joseph affirms both divine influence and human responsibility. Oh no, I think we've come to it. This is one of Vicky's both and, the dreaded both and, that our beloved minister is always telling us is the right way to think about the world, as opposed to black and white. What does New Thought tell us? New Thought tells us that, first and foremost, we change ourselves, we change our lives, and we change the lives of those around us by what we think and what we feel. Here's another interesting story, the story of the prodigal son. The focus of this story is almost always on the father, how he was so forgiving and loving that he took his son back, even after the son had squandered his inheritance and lived a really bad life out there. He took him back when he came home. But the more interesting interpretation of this story, I think, is the son. The son changed his thinking while he was out there starving to death and living a bad life. He changed his thinking, and he came home. And because he changed his thinking, his father changed and opened his home. The son was responsible for creating the miracle, I think, not the father. In fact, it always takes two. New Thought focuses on co-creation because the God, goddess, divine thought, whatever you want to call it, inside us, expresses through us, and thus the creation of a just and compassionate world is up to us. No God, goddess will show up to fix things. Which also suggests that it was Joseph's decision to forgive and go home and behave correctly that caused the miracle of his father's love and devotion. Back to fathers. But isn't that what fathers do? They fix things, right? After first getting mad and stomping around.
Well, my father never did that.
No, none of our fathers, of course. Perhaps this cultural view needs to be updated. In fact, there are plenty of enlightening parenting words for fathers in Judeo-Christian traditions. Proverbs says that we should start children off in the right way they should go, and then even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Unity encourages this idea of father as teacher, example, and living guide. From the beginning of the Unity movement, Unity has presented its teachings with great conviction and authority, not the authority of the church, but the authority of truth. And it is into this role that those of us who are fathers, or those of us practicing fatherhood, are called. Unity students do not ask God to fix things. They unequivocally affirm that God has already given it to them, and they expect it to appear. For example, rather than asking God for healing, a prayer in silent Unity service said, "I am aglow with the realization that I am filled with your presence, and I know that I am expressing your healing love as I grow stronger each day." Change the way you think, you change the way you live, and you change all around you. While there is certainly no one right way for fathers to show up, there's no one right way to be a father, to do fathering. This mission of guiding, teaching, and love is a big one. Living and demonstrating the Unity 5 basic principles is a gift that fathers can, and those of us who are fathering can give, and it changes lives. Because we believe that God is the one presence, the one power in the universe, everything flows from this one source, which means we are expressions of this one presence and one power. We are made in the image and likeness, meaning we are created beings with the capacity to demonstrate and materialize our thoughts. As Christ beings, we are the idea of God in action. Our thoughts, prayers, and actions grow our own consciousness, and then they affect all around us, changing our own lives and changing the lives of others. I'm going to close with a favorite bit of wisdom from the Apostle Paul. I always think of this as coming from a father to his beloved child. A father who has realized there is no intervening God, and who, the father, embodies God. The words of Paul. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. Namaste. I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, releasing with an audible sigh. Join me as we meditate on fathers and on fathering, that which we have experienced and also that which we have given back to the world. Fathers, we remember your place in our lives and your guidance. We acknowledge your love and strengths and your mistakes and limitations. We open our hearts to forgiveness, accepting that even when it felt to us that you fell short, you were doing the best you know how. We value how you taught us to venture out, to take risks. We remember that you helped us ride that bike, that menacing chain of balance, and bandaged our skin knees. From earliest diaper changes, to making lunches, to walking brides down the aisle, we give thanks for how you were intricately involved. Amen to dads and to the Father in all of us. Let us take these thoughts of fathers and fathering into the silence as we invite the gifts of forgiveness and of gratitude to fill our hearts and minds. We acknowledge the loving Father, Mother God that lives in us and which helps to unify all of us. We open to this amazing spiritual force that draws us together and encourage us to model and teach what it means to be a loving and responsible parent in all the different and unique ways that shows up. And in this awareness, we bring our attention back to this room